Welcome to a deep dive into Flatland.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of this? Flatland by Edwin A. Abbott.
I have, yeah.
A romance of many dimensions. So it's a pretty wild ride through geometry and Victorian satire.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's really interesting how it uses this, two-dimensional world to kind of hold up a mirror
Right.
to our own perceptions and prejudices and things.
It's interesting, too, because it's very accessible for, somebody who's not necessarily a math whiz
Right.
to sort of wrap their head around.
Exactly.
The idea of, like, other dimensions. Because we can't really,
Yeah, it's hard to wrap our minds around, right?
Yeah. So picture this. You're living in Flatland, literally a flat world, like a sheet of paper.
Okay.
Everyone is a shape, and their social status, determined by the number of sides,
I like that.
triangles, working class,
Yeah.
squares,
Yeah.
professionals.
Makes sense.
And the more sides you have, the closer you get to, like, those elite circles.
It's brilliant satire, though, when you think about it.
Oh, totally.
Just taking that simple geometric concept and using it to expose, the absurdity of social stratification.
And don't even get me started on the women.
Oh, no.
They are literally straight lines.
The thinnest possible shape.
The thinnest possible shape. Talk about being overlooked.
Yeah.
They're in constant danger of being accidentally poked by a sharp-angled, lower class triangle.
Right.
They have to constantly announce their presence with a peace cry.
Peace cry, yeah.
Just to be noticed.
Which, yeah, again, very pointed commentary, right, on
Yeah.
the vulnerability of women and just the limited agency they've historically had.
It's amazing how he weaves these social critiques into this bizarre geometrical world.
Yeah.
But speaking of bizarre, let's talk about how they see each other, or rather how they don't.
Okay.
Imagine a world where everything looks like a straight line. How do you tell anyone apart?
It's a good question. I mean, it makes sense, in a way, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. So they've developed these fascinating ways of identifying each other. Hearing's obviously crucial, right? With different shapes having distinct vocal tones.
Right, yeah.
But maybe the most intriguing is the method of feeling.
Feeling.
Because, yeah, you can't just, glance across the room and recognize someone in Flatland.
Yeah, they literally have to, touch each other.
They have to touch each other to identify the angles.
Can you imagine that?
It's so bizarre to think about.
And the lower classes, because their angles are sharper,
Right.
they have to rely on this more because their sight isn't as developed.
Right. It's like their primary sense in a way.
Right.
Whereas the upper classes have trained their sight to recognize minute differences in how shapes appear as they move.
Which is so fascinating to me. It's like you're saying, okay, so even the way we perceive the world
Yeah.
is shaped by our social conditioning.
Absolutely. It's a very, it's a very clever way to kind of highlight that.
It makes you wonder, what are our blind spots?
Yes.
What are we not seeing because of our own Flatland perspective?
What are we taking for granted, And that becomes even more apparent when color gets introduced to Flatland
Oh, right.
and what's known as the color revolt.
So now we're not just talking about shapes, but also color.
Yeah, you can imagine the chaos, the excitement.
So it's like, imagine living in a world of black and white,
Right.
and suddenly, bam,
Color explodes onto the scene.
color. And everyone's like, what?
It's revolutionary. I mean, for them it would be.
Revolutionary, exactly.
Makes it easier to identify each other, art flourishes, life just gets more vibrant.
But of course, not everybody is thrilled
Of course not. Yeah.
about this whole color development.
Right, and that's where the social commentary, I think, really ramps up, right?
Well, right.
Because who do you think gets excluded from this color revolution? The priests and the women. No logical reason is given, just an arbitrary decision by the ruling class to maintain their control.
It's like how new technologies or new ideas are often met with resistance,
Exact.
especially when they threaten the status quo.
Right.
Like the printing press, think about that.
Huge upheaval.
Or even something like the bicycle was once seen as like this radical invention.
Yeah, exactly. It's that fear of change, right?
Right.
The potential for social upheaval. And so what happens? Color gets suppressed, progress is stifled, things go back to the way they were.
Exactly.
But it's a cycle we see repeated throughout history, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. But just when you think you've got a handle on Flatland, Abbott throws in a real mind bender,
Oh, yeah. What's that?
a visitor
Okay.
from another dimension. Spaceland.
Ooh, we're going 3 dimensions.
3 dimensions.
I'm intrigued.
Right, so we're going to get into that in the next part.
Oh, right.
So last time, we left our Flatland friends with a Three-dimensional being, the sphere, right in their midst.
And he's trying to explain up.
Yeah, like, good luck with that, right?
Imagine trying to picture, like, a direction that's perpendicular to literally everything you've ever known.
It'd be like trying to describe the color blue to someone who's blind.
It's just the framework of their understanding, it just doesn't allow for it.
It's like when, you're trying to explain a complicated idea to a kid,
Right.
and their eyes just glaze over like you're speaking another language.
Exactly, and that's A square with this whole third dimension thing.
Totally.
The sphere tries that. I mean, he uses analogies.
Yeah, he tries to be helpful.
He even, like, passes through Flatland.
Oh, right.
So they see him as, like, a changing circle, because that's all they can perceive in 2 dimensions.
Right.
But it's just a series of, like, really confusing events for A square.
And he doesn't take it well, does he?
No, he accuses the sphere of being a magician,
Oh, yeah.
a devil, anything but what he is.
Right, like, there's a perfectly logical explanation.
Right, but I'm going to reject that because it's just too far outside his experience.
It's kind of funny how, the sphere's practically handing him the key to this whole new understanding.
Yeah.
And A square keeps trying to, like, cram it into his little Flatland box.
Exactly, and I think it's something we all do, right?
Oh, totally.
Cling to our familiar explanations even when they're inadequate.
Right.
Because the alternative, like embracing a new way of thinking, is just, it's uncomfortable.
Right, it's much easier to just be like, nope, I'm right, you're wrong.
Exactly.
So anyway, the sphere, to his credit, doesn't give up.
He's persistent.
He's like, okay, you need to see it to believe it, right?
Yeah. He pulls A square out of Flatland, up into Spaceland.
Whoa.
Talk about a mind-blowing experience.
I can't even imagine.
Suddenly, you can see the inside of everything.
What?
A concept that would be utterly inconceivable from his 2-dimensional vantage point.
Right.
We're talking serious sensory overload here.
Yeah.
And then he sees all these shapes that would be impossible in his world. Cubes, spheres, pyramids.
It's like, whoa, right.
Right, things he couldn't even have dreamt of.
Yeah, it's like reality just shattered.
Exactly, and now think about what that must do to his perception of the sphere.
Right. Like, the sphere is no longer just a weird circle.
Back in Flatland, the sphere's actions seemed magical. Appearing, disappearing, changing size.
Right.
But in Spaceland, he sees, no, these are just the natural consequences of moving through 3 dimensions.
It's like realizing that, someone who could do really good card tricks isn't actually magic.
Right, there's a logic to it.
Exactly. It's like, oh, okay, you're just really good at sleight of hand.
Right, exactly.
And that's when it hits A square.
What's that?
If these powers that seem so amazing in Flatland are just normal in Spaceland,
Okay.
what else exists that's even beyond his comprehension now?
The possibilities suddenly become kind of mind-blowing.
Right. It makes you wonder, what are we missing?
Exactly. What higher truths are we blind to because of our own limited perspectives?
It's a pretty humbling thought. So what happens next when A square goes back to Flatland? Does he become this prophet of the 3rd dimension?
Well, so A square, he's back in Flatland after seeing Spaceland, and, well, imagine trying to describe a 3-dimensional world.
I can't even imagine. Like, where would you even begin?
Right. It's like, how do you convey something that's fundamentally outside the realm of their understanding?
It'd be like explaining the internet to, like, a medieval peasant.
Exactly. They'd think you were making it up.
What's this glowing box and wait, cat videos?
And sadly, A square faces a similar reaction. Ridicule, accusations of heresy, even imprisonment.
Oh, wow, yeah. They don't exactly roll out the red carpet for him, do they? It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Considering how he initially dismissed the sphere.
It really is. Shows how even the most mind-blowing experiences don't necessarily change deeply held beliefs.
And think about how Flatlanders identify each other. By feeling each other's angles, right?
Yeah, it's their primary way of perceiving the world. But remember, the upper classes, they consider it a little vulgar.
Because they have their sight, their superior sight.
Exactly. They rely solely on that. And, it kind of makes you think maybe true understanding requires more than just, like, book smarts or, in their case, good eyesight.
Right. Like, maybe you need empathy, too. The ability to step into another's perspective, even if it seems totally alien to you.
Exactly. It's a powerful message, I think, to be more like the sphere patient, willing to meet people where they are.
And maybe a little more like A square, too. Willing to risk it all for a glimpse of a greater truth.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Flatland, I hope it leaves you pondering a few things, like What unseen dimensions might exist in our own world?
And are we open-minded enough to recognize them if we stumbled across them?
It's a question worth asking ourselves. Because the universe is full of mysteries, and sometimes the most incredible discoveries happen when we dare to step outside our comfort zones.
That's it for our journey through Flatland. See you next time.